Okay, welcome to the Historic Preservation Commission meeting of Thursday, April 17th, 2014. The time is 5:04. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Garpetian. Commissioner Morgan.
Here.
Commissioner Shire.
Here.
Commissioner Vartanian.
Yes,
And
here.
Commissioner Vidor.
Here.
Thank
All
you.
present.
Next is report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on or before Monday, April 14th, 2014 on the bulletin board outside of City Hall. Next is approval of the minutes of March 20th, 2014. Any comments or corrections?
I have a few
Please.
corrections on the header. It should read March 20th, 2014
That is correct.
instead of January. Then I had actually some questions as to how to really read Section 7A. Regarding the motions and approvals, I believe there are some inaccuracies there, but if someone could walk us through.
Unfortunately, these are, I didn't have a chance to edit these, so one of our colleagues kind of went through this, and it wasn't included in my package. So if someone has an extra copy of the minutes, I can look at that.
We had two motions, and it doesn't seem like the motions are clearly identified, and it doesn't seem like the votes are accurate.
Okay, well, we'll clarify that. I don't think I'll be able to do the votes right now. The first motion was to approve the project if the I don't even want to guess. It was
Okay.
it was the harder, the
Yeah.
stronger
Yes.
motion.
So I think it needs to be identified here,
Yeah,
And then the
you're
vote-
completely right about that.
and the votes are incorrect.
Yeah, this is
Shire
this
should
is
be
this
a
is a big
no?
mistake, and it's a problem
Right,
of
yes.
staff time,
Okay.
and we shouldn't have left it in the place we left it. So I apologize for that.
Okay, and then under
We'll
the,
correct. We won't take a vote on these today, obviously, and we'll bring
Thank
them
you.
back next month. So.
and then under the first motion, the second, which I don't think is accurate anyway, but the spelling of my name is incorrect.
On which, oh,
Yes.
First motion.
why not? Any bells? Yeah, well, we'll correct the
That's
whole
it.
thing and make it clear.
Okay, thank you.
There's a view, yeah.
Thank you for that. These are the worst minutes ever, it looks like.
Well, I didn't want to say that,
Yeah,
but
we've had a few
They are
tweaks here and there
questionable.
over the years, but this is a new low, so sorry
That
about that.
happens. Thank you. So you'll bring that back next meeting
Yeah.
for approval. Okay, so next is oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. And, our first speaker is Sean Bursell.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Commission. I'm Sean Bursell with the Glendale Historical Society. And May is Preservation Month, and which is very exciting. We've got 3 great programs that the Historical Society is presenting or co-presenting next month. A couple of them are on your agenda at item 8C, I believe, so I won't discuss them there, but that's the Civic Center. I won't discuss them here. That's the Civic Center walking tour on May the 10th, and the landmark this session presentation on May the 21st.
Actually, if you could talk about that one, because I didn't have the location.
Okay,
so
great.
Let everyone know when and where, what time.
I was just afraid Mr. Loomis would slap my wrist for addressing something that's on the agenda in oral communications, but I guess I get a dispensation.
This kind of stuff we can repeat twice.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the first event is on May the 4th, which is a Sunday, and it's called Shattering the Myths of Window Replacement. And it's a presentation on window maintenance and repair that will demonstrate for people how vintage wood and steel windows can be restored rather than replaced. And I know Steel windows have been an issue lately. And a lot of people are sold a bill of goods by the window replacement industry and told that they have to pull their beautiful wood windows out and replace them with vinyl because it's more energy efficient, it's more cost effective, et cetera, which really isn't true. The life cycle of those vinyl windows is very short. You don't get your money back. And wood windows and steel windows, if properly maintained, can last forever. And we're going to have a couple experts on window repair who will show people how to take care of their wood windows and their steel windows so that they are properly maintained, and how to restring those ropes so your wood windows should be moving up and down very easily. I had it done in my house, and it's wonderful. So that will be on Sunday, May the 4th at 1 p.m. in front of the Doctor's House Museum, which is, of course, in Brand Park. And I should point out that the Doctor's House has wood windows that are 125 years old and are still operational. So they can last forever if properly taken care of. And that is free and open to the public on Sunday, May 4th, 1 p.m., Shattering the Myths of Window Replacement. The second item, they're going to start the presentation at 1, so it's not like if you show up at 2, it's not like you can show up at 2 and you'll get the whole presentation over again. So it'll probably last about an hour, maybe a little longer. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. The second item is the walking tour on May the 10th. And did you want me to?
Sure, I'll reiterate.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We're doing in conjunction with the Historic Preservation Commission. It's a free, self-guided walking tour of the Civic Center, including this beautiful building, the Municipal Services Building that we're in today, Glendale City Hall, the Post Office, the Good House, and other notable structures within the historic core of the city of Glendale. And the walking tours are going to run from 10 to noon, and then at noon there's going to be a presentation of the unveiling and dedication of the plaque for the Municipal Services Building, which of course is the 100th item or property on the Glendale Register of Historic Resources. So people can come to the Municipal Services Building on the morning of Saturday, May the 10th, from 10 to noon, and we will provide them with a booklet that has a map and descriptions of the various properties that are on the tour. And again, this is free and it's open to the public, and we hope people will come and walk around the center of Glendale and learn about some of these wonderful structures that we have here. The third event for Preservation Month is called Landmark This Glendale, and it's on May the 21st at 7 p.m. At the historic Seeley's building, which is at 1800 South Brand Boulevard in Glendale, which is a great structure and is a wonderful exhibit of adaptive reuse. We're taking a historic structure and modernizing it, making it work for today's environment, but keeping those historic attributes of the structure. So on Wednesday, May the 21st at 7 p.m., we're going to have Landmark This Glendale, and this will educate people how to nominate a property to the Glendale Register of Historic Resources, and they can learn about the Mills Act, the financial incentives that allows the owners of historic properties to qualify for significant property tax reductions. And we have an expert presenter on that, and that's going to be Mr. Platt, and so we're looking forward to that. Once again, that's free and open to the public. That's May the 21st, and so we hope people will be there. So again, May the 4th, 1 p.m., Doctor's House, the Windows Replacement Workshop. May the 10th, 10 to noon is the walking tour of the Civic Center. And then May the 21st at 7 p.m. is Landmark This Glendale, about the Glendale Register of Historic Resources and how to nominate properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, for taking us through Preservation Month. We look forward to it. Okay, our next speaker is Catherine Yurka.
Even though it's on the agenda.
You can,
Okay.
These are your 5
Okay,
minutes,
okay.
so please go ahead.
Hello, I'm Catherine Yurka, and I'm here on behalf of the Glendale Historical Society to talk about 1720 Grandview. I watched the video of last month's meeting, and I know how thoughtful and serious the discussion was, and that you made a very difficult decision based on available information. But we do have concerns about that case, and since the issues will no doubt come up again, we thought it best to raise them now and hope it will be helpful in future. It seems like a central question is, does the Glendale Design Guidelines for residences in historic districts, which are based on the Secretary of the Interior standards, allow the removal of particular character-defining features of individual houses, such as the windows and brick exterior, so long as they are replaced with features that are generally appropriate for a house's basic architectural style? Glendale's guidelines state that, quote, replacement of historic windows should be limited to severely deteriorated window components, and when wholesale window replacement is necessary, new windows should match the historic window as closely as possible in type, style, proportion, material, profile, etc. No evidence was presented that replacement was necessary and that the windows were beyond repair, and thus the principal criterion for replacement was absent. Also, these windows do not match the historic windows. Leaving aside the question of materials, several commissioners observed the former windows were thin, beautiful, streamlined, elegant, the replacements notably bulky and heavy with a significantly different glass-to-frame ratio. A key point to keep in mind, it doesn't matter if something like these new windows could have been found on another minimal traditional in the past. Replacement needs to match the historic windows on this house. These windows, we believe, do not conform to the design guidelines and should have been rejected. The same is true for the stucco. The brick exterior was a character-defining feature. The Glendale guidelines for a minimal traditional state, stucco or brick cladding should be preserved and maintained. And then in general, original architectural details should not be covered with stucco vinyl siding, etc. After the 1933 Long Beach earthquake, structural masonry was seldom used without redundant reinforcing materials. The brick row-lock windowsills, which were evident in the photographs, would normally not have been done if the brick were added later or merely decorative. Moreover, the reason given for declaring the brick not original was that the profile of the windows didn't change when the house was stuccoed, suggesting it was thin brick not in use in 36. But this assumes the brick was removed before stuccoing, which doesn't make any sense from a construction standpoint. Brick is an excellent substrate, so it's most likely still there under less than half an inch of stucco. But even if the bricks were a later addition, they likely predate 1953, the end point of the district's period of significance, which makes them a contributing feature anyway. Since brick is the baseline exterior building material in the survey, and there's no evidence that it was added later, we believe the alteration does not conform to the design guidelines and should have been removed. I won't go into the shutters for the sake of time, but the unanimous conclusion of professionals in historic preservation who are involved with the society and have reviewed the materials is that the house, even without the gates, no longer qualifies as a contributor to its historic district. And whether or not Glendale has a formal mechanism for noting this change, under the California Environmental Quality Act, the loss of a contributing property represents the loss of a historic resource, and it's my understanding that that might actually trigger a review under CEQA. We regret the loss of this house, but more troubling for us is the revelation that such significant alterations to the windows and brick, which prompted a 2-hour discussion here, would likely have been approved at the staff level and not gone to the commission at all. That seems like a more fundamental problem. Approval of alterations such as these demonstrates a lot of flexibility, in fact, excessive flexibility, that just does not seem to be in keeping with the city's guidelines and national standards, and that does not comply with accepted preservation practice or with the historic district ordinance. It's imperative that the city follow the standards and rules in place, and owners who do work illegally not be treated differently from those who are simply proposing to make changes, as Commissioner Shire, I think, pointed out most specifically. We understand that resources for historic preservation in Glendale have been drastically reduced, even as the number of properties and the workload has increased. And we appreciate the heroic efforts of staff to do much more with much less. But we can't allow historic properties to be stripped of character-defining features against our rules and standards. And this may require more oversight from the HPC, and we are sensitive to the constraints on your time as well. But I think we can agree that what we don't want are historic districts that are packed with generic houses that more or less conform to basic general characteristics of their original architectural style. That's not history, and those aren't historic districts. So thank you for your time and your patience and your service on the Commission.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
For staff or
For
for
the
the
speaker?
speaker?
Sure, go ahead.
Of course.
It says there'll be no debate or discussion.
No debate. I just
Oh.
have a question. Do you get a notice?
Your microphone.
Oh, it's on.
No.
Easier to discuss.
It's my understanding that the president of the Historical Society receives a copy of the agenda and any relating materials a couple of days before the meeting. And I can say that as a result of this last case, that we will be reviewing those very carefully and perhaps sending out material to the Preservation Advocacy Committee to review so that we can be here at an earlier date.
If I want to do something.
No, the historical.
It depends. It depends on the extent of the work. Any work that will need to come to the commission is available on the city website, and the Historical Society receives the package of materials, including staff reports and the agenda, at the same time that the commission receives it, which is generally a week before the meeting.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Madam Chair has to allow you if you want to come back. I think Sean wanted to.
Let's see what our. Maybe you could
We have to share
share. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. I speak louder.
I probably just need you to fill out a speaker card at the end for this item.
I just wanted to add, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioner Garpedian, I just wanted to do one clarification on that. And planning does send us notices of things that are, for instance, going to Design Review Board or anything that has that sort of a public notice that has a separate mailer that goes out to the neighboring properties. We do get those notices. So I just wanted to do that clarification. Thank you.
Okay.
And just to add to that clarification, we have a category of work that's considered exempt. It's over-the-counter permitting, and the public is not noticed when we are able to make the decision that we can exempt something from board or commission review, or from our new process, which is administrative design review, which also entails public noticing to homeowners groups as well as people within a 500-foot radius of a property. And that's the only way the system could function. There's no way we could interact on every single case that comes to the counter.
Okay. Without reopening the discussion on our decision, I just want to open up to anybody else who
If you have questions about the
anything to say
process.
or a question.
Until
We're good?
your update.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll wait till then.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry. So those are all the cards I have for oral communications. Number 5 is comments from commissioners.
I have one.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank the Glendale Historic Society for putting on a great membership event or membership drive event. It was the Taste of Spain, and so I would encourage all of those who are not members to join so you can attend these great events. I met a few members there, and they were very excited to be part of the society, and so it was a really good turnout, beautiful event. So just wanted to say thank you.
I concur. Did you have something? Go ahead.
I'm not sure this belongs here in comments, so if it's better stated somewhere else, you can shut me down and I'll revisit it. But I read an article in the last Historical Society newsletter about an interesting property at 641 Sonora, which is an old parachute factory that apparently it came to be known is listed, I believe not only eligible, but listed on the California Register, and that gave rise to some questions and discussion about properties that are listed or eligible for the California Register. So I wondered if it would be possible to agendize a brief discussion about the properties on the California Register, how those facts are disclosed, and how that's handled at the city level, so we can get kind of an understanding of that issue and maybe any others. I know Glendale Federal, I believe, is listed now on the California Register, although I don't quite remember whether it's been declared eligible or
Glendale
listed.
Federal is eligible.
Eligible, okay.
But we did learn from the Historical Society that there are a number of buildings that are listed on the California Register through a rather Byzantine process, but nonetheless they're listed, and we're going to be taking care. We've already taken care of it in the most important way, but since it's not agendized, I'll wait till next month. But so that everyone knows, we've taken care of the basic thing to make sure that permits aren't issued in error on those properties in the future. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Vidor. Anybody else?
Yes. I received an email from Mike Shea, who's the the local history librarian at the Special Collections, and this email reads, and that's what's up on the screen right now, attached is a photograph featured in various editions of the Glendale Your Homes booklet from the 1920s. The image normally was accompanied by a vague house on the foothills description. When a person asked about it recently, I was unable to identify it. In putting the word out on Facebook, many suggested the Walters house, but that didn't seem quite right, or at least there would have been enough work done on it that I'd need confirmation. Anyway, if anybody can identify that, and we'll contact Jay Platt, we are offering the first person who correctly identifies this house a copy of John Newcomb's. It's the Trails of La Cañada. We have the Winnetka story, but I don't think you're really interested in the Winnetka story. But we will give out one copy if you can correctly identify this house. And
I like this new game show thing
house?
we're doing.
Yeah.
So.
It's kind
The
of
one on top?
I think
the one on top, yes.
There's city staff ineligible in this competition.
Yes.
Yeah, and the prize is being offered by Commissioner Morgan as a private citizen.
Private citizen, yes. Has nothing to do with the city itself. But we'd like to know where the house is or was.
No, and this looks very much like a house the Commission considered last year for designation
Stephen
on Adams
Smith
Hill,
House,
and so it makes me wonder if it's the same designer, because there's so many similarities, but definitely a different house, different terrain, and all that. So
You're giving up too many hints to the public, Mr. Okay, my mic is working now. Thank you.
And we have no idea where in the city this is. That's what we're trying to figure out.
Yes.
It's on the hills.
I
Yeah,
know. Well, it looks like there's a
it's easier. Don't use this.
Yeah.
the building down in the left-hand corner. Looks sort of municipal or something.
Happy hunting.
Yes.
Yeah. Off we go. Okay. 6 is old business, and having none, we'll move to new business. 7A is presentation regarding city's issuance of proposed request for qualifications soliciting potential interest in rehabilitation work and limited development at Rockhaven.
I just wanted to give a quick introduction to this project, and then I'll introduce Peter Zovak, our Deputy Director of Housing. The Commission, I believe everyone's very familiar with Rockhaven, an important, very important historic site in North Glendale that the city acquired in 2007, 2008, because it was under the threat of development, and we thought it was quite possible that the site would be lost. And there's this real deep passion for this site for many Glendalians, but especially for the people in North Glendale. In the interim, this site has basically sat there. We don't know how to use it. We don't know what to do with it. We've been doing routine maintenance. A group has formed called Friends of Rockhaven, which is an advocacy group focused on this site. The Historical Society of the Crescenta Valley and TGHS have each taken strong interests in seeing the site protected, certainly. One of the only ways that this will happen is if we explore possibilities of what might be called private-public partnerships or some sort of option, in which case a developer or a potential user of the site would enter into a partnership with the city that would look to some of the portions of Rockhaven that are not developed right now. There's a lot of open space on the site, and possibly build something new there, find some new use or development there, and then incorporate the historic buildings at Rockhaven into this project, which would include their rehabilitation, restoration as needed, and kind of find this happy solution. So what a request for qualifications is the earliest step in this process. We don't know who's out there who's interested in the site. We don't know that anyone's interested in the site, but we're very interested to hear what people think is a realistic option for potentially looking into finding a use and new uses at the site that will maintain its historic integrity. A baseline of the city proposal, and Peter will tell you this, is that we ensure that Rockhaven, which is clearly eligible for the Glendale Register, I believe it's eligible for the National Register and California Register also. Whatever happens there would happen with the caveat that those levels of eligibility remain throughout the project and then after the project's completed. To that end, we've identified kind of a building site on the west end of Rockhaven. If you look at this diagram, this is where there are open parcels of land that could be built on without affecting the kind of the very cloistered, tightly knit grouping of these buildings and the really important walkways and garden areas between them. There's also a well that was dug by the Glendale Water and Power on the far west side of the north part of the site, so that area would be off limits to development. So whoever is going to be looking at this project is going to look at this diagram and understand that, you know, almost every single one of the old buildings is identified as historically important. If one or two of these buildings were lost or altered over the years, we'd have to consider, would that affect the eligibility of the site? The only buildings that we've identified so far as, you know, you can take these buildings down now would be this building L, kind of at the front of the site, which was built after the 1971 earthquake as a replacement for the original Rockhaven headquarters building. The nurses' wing, which is building A here, which is very deteriorated, and I don't know if it was officially red tagged by the city, but it's considered at that level. And then building B is kind of a little shed building that was kind of the caretaker's workshop, basically. So at this point, any potential bidder or someone submitting qualifications for the project would look at this and start thinking, okay, I've got to figure out a way to work around these buildings and find uses for them that integrate or complement whatever happens there. So if I assume you don't have any questions for me, hopefully everyone knows the site really well. So Peter Zovak from Housing will introduce the RFQ.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Peter Zovak. I'm the Deputy Director of Housing. I don't know what else there is to say. Jay said he was just going to give a few words, and he almost gave my entire presentation.
I wanted you to take it easy.
The one thing he did fail to mention is that there's a city team that was put together to look at the development of this Rockhaven property through this RFQ process. And other members of the team, myself, Jay is on the team, Alan Loomis is on the team, as well as our Economic Development Director, Phil Lanzafame, is on this team. We also have our Director of Community Development, Sanagani, Director of Parks, Jess Duran, as well as some staffers from additional staffers from Parks on this team. And as Jay had mentioned, the city acquired this property back in April of 2008. Purchased, it's approximately 3.4 acres, purchased it for $8.25 million, translates to about $55 a square foot in that purchase. And the purpose of the acquisition was to protect the historic nature of the site, preserve the site or portions of it, as many portions of it as community space, and to create park space and or recreational service programming for the community. So that was the intent. So immediately after the acquisition, we continued to suffer through a very slow economic recovery. And in addition, the city's redevelopment agency was disbanded by the state of California. So our ability to be able to develop this site wholly using just city finances and vision alone severely curtailed. And as Jay mentioned, in the meantime, the property continues to suffer. Very minimal upkeep has been able to be put in place, some of it on a voluntary basis from some of the societies that was mentioned before, and then some of it through some of allocation of funding from the city, particularly in the Parks Department. So the idea was, as Jade mentioned, is to determine whether or not there was an ability to enter into a public-private partnership with the right developer to be able to develop the site, look at the areas that can allow for new development, and be sensitive to the areas that need preservation, rehabilitation, restoration. And that's the purpose of this RFQ, this request for qualifications. We're looking to identify developers who will be able to introduce a suitable type of limited but focused new development of the site while also preserving the potentially historic structures and providing the site and open space or portions of it to the community for public use. It is not a commitment. What we're doing is, as I said, just looking for developers that have demonstrated experience in doing something similar in the past with other agencies, and those that have a vision for what they think that this property could look like that they can communicate to us to then go to the next step. And we anticipate the next step after identifying a developer or developers through this RFQ process would be working and issuing an actual request for proposal where they would take their vision to the next level of outline the project with design, schematics, and things like that, and economics for the city and the stakeholders to consider. For the purposes of this update, I provided you an outline of the RFQ itself. It's still in a draft form that is going through review through the different city departments. We anticipate the item to be heard before the City Council on April 29th, and we'll be requesting their feedback on the item and then asking for approval to issue the RFQ itself. We plan to do that. If given approval on the 29th, we plan to issue it on May 2nd. We would like to have it out there in the community for about 60 days, so we've asked for responses to come back on July 2nd. During the 60 days that this RFQ is outstanding, we thought it was important to allow the developers access to the site. So we've scheduled 2 open houses at the site during this 60-day term. We felt that it'd be important for the developers to come out, most likely by themselves, to see what's involved, and then allow an opportunity for them to come out with their consultants and partners to then look at it in more detail a second time. It's not a requirement, but we tell the developers that it's highly suggested they take advantage of this. The RFQ is really a generic RFQ. It provides an introduction as to what it is that we're trying to accomplish with it, the issuance. We provide some background to the City of Glendale. We expect to have regional developers looking at this, national developers looking at this. We hope to. So we needed to give them some context of Glendale itself. Then we narrow it down to specifically as to what is taking place in North Glendale. We give them some context for the area of North Glendale. We then give them context for the Crescenta Valley. We talk a little bit about the North Glendale Community Plan and the efforts by the Planning Division in putting that together. Talk to them a little about, provide information about the Montrose Shopping Park District and the Spar Heights Business District in terms of serving that immediate area. And then we talk about Verdugo City. We take them through the Rockhaven site description, topography, things like that. Background history on the sanitarium itself, the purpose and reasons for the city's acquisition back in 2008. We give an explanation as to what's taking place on that northwest corner of the Glendale Water and Power site. They did drill an exploratory well, found it to be a viable well, and they do plan on taking 75 feet of the frontage and the entire depth, so that basically that square area, for future development of a well site that would then be, water would be ported out to a processing facility. It's still a little unclear on, they expect to come out with some specific guidelines for development of it in 1 to 2 years. And then we talk about the historic status of the property and the buildings that are there. We ask for developers to come up with a vision for the site. They don't necessarily have to have architectural drawings of that vision, but they have to be able to communicate it in the RFQ so that we get a comfort level as to the fact that they really understand what is taking place and what it is that the city is trying to achieve. We have a section we talk about community involvement and what the city thinks good community involvement is. It is not just going to be, if we pursue this on down the lines, it's not just going to be communication and direction between the developer and the city, that there are community stakeholders involved here, there are neighborhoods involved here that would want to be able to have a say, and we want to make sure that we have a developer that recognizes what is good community involvement, how to receive information, process it, and determine whether or not they might be able to come up with some solutions for some community concerns. The RFQ then outlines what it is that we're looking for in the developer concept, their experience. If they have some preliminary financials, we ask them to provide that. What partnerships they might anticipate for the development, eventual development of the site, what experience they might have in community involvement and public outreach, what are some of the constraints and assumptions they might have. We then intend to, once we receive the RFQ, establish a review committee to go over them and then come up with a recommendation to the City Council of a developer or developers to then pursue a request for proposals. That would be a much longer and involved process. As I said, this we anticipate to be a 60-day RFQ issuance. If we do get to an RFP, that would be at least a 3 to 5 month process, just because of the time involved to put projects together. I don't know if there's, I should say, when in the section of development of the site, I'll read kind of from the draft RFQ that we have so far. We make this statement is that whatever it is, the final project that the developer proposed should preserve all or most of the historically significant buildings through adaptive reuse, maintain and preserve a significant portion of historic landscape, allow for public access to all or portions of the historic campus. We state that any new construction on the site should be contextually sensitive to the historic campus and compatible in scale to the existing buildings as well as the neighborhood. And if a developer is able to provide a proposal that is like that, then we would anticipate going to the next step of an RFP. I don't know if there are any questions you might have. Alan, Jay, Phil?
I have a couple.
I have a question too.
As part of the RFQ, are you proposing anything? Or if obviously there's been a lot of discussion about Rockhaven. Are there any conceptual suggestions being made as to?
No, what we are saying is that we're entertaining a wide range of potential development scenarios for the site. We can look at housing. We'd be willing to look at office, hotel, institutional, or community uses. We thought we'd give them those broad parameters and see what the response might be. If we get no response or interest, we might have to relook at this.
We're also hoping we hear things that none of us have ever even thought about. So.
And what's the city's viewpoint on designation of the property and when? Obviously, it's not an if, it's a when, and when that would happen, and when the right time, and what the, what's going to be stated in the RFQ about that.
I will tell you, we make a statement that I think is, the city has committed, and I'll read from that draft RFQ. The city has committed that upon completion of any project on the property, the historic Rockhaven campus will be nominated for listing on the Glendale Register. So we do specify that that is our intent, and is something they need to keep in mind as they go through this visioning process.
Thank you.
A question for Jay first. Jay, regarding the nomination, would it not make sense to get on the register first so that the rules and the guidelines would help guide the new development rather than after the fact?
Well, the site is already a historic resource under CEQA, so
Okay.
we have definite environmental review protections under CEQA.
Okay.
The issue there is just the real-world issue of a developer is much less likely to be interested in a site that's already designated than one that they can work toward that designation. I think between the community involvement and recognition of the site, us bringing updates to the commission. I'm not worried that we're going to lose the site during any process that moves forward, but I understand why that does seem like the ideal situation, but I don't think we want to limit the views of the bidders at this time.
And then my second question, how do you do outreach to the developers to get the right development community and make awareness that this RFQ is going out? What's your process?
Well, it's specialized, so it's going to deviate a little bit from our standard practice. In standard RFQs to the development community, we look at those developers that have already built in Glendale and that built successful projects. So we will issue out the RFQ to them. And that would be both for market rate housing development and some of our more successful affordable housing developers, just in case that is a product that might be able to facilitate this vision for the site that the city has for it. We also plan on issuing the RFQ to the market rate development community that is out there and is developed in the Southern California region. And we would get those through different associations that we belong to and membership roles. For instance, the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housers, the now defunct Redevelopment Agency. We also have, on the development team, personal contacts with projects and developers in other areas that we will include on the RFQ issuance. We'll do it electronically on the city's website, GTV6. We will advertise it on some specific electronic. I'm going to look at Alan because we just had this discussion not too long ago, Alan.
Yeah, we'll be probably posting it through Twitter, Facebook, posting it on LinkedIn. A number of the, like the American Institute of Architects, Los Angeles, and some of the other kind of professional service organizations that have places on their websites where you can post RFPs for development. So we'll be posting it or submitting it to them for, hopefully their administrators will post this information. So hopefully we'll get the word out pretty broadly. Of course, I'd be looking to the community and the commissioners and other, the broader community that's interested in the property to come up with other ideas and help forward on a link. Hey, this is an opportunity we're really excited about. We hope you'd be interested in it if you have contacts that might have otherwise missed it.
There are also some nationwide and statewide message boards and listservs that we'll put it on that are preservation focused and have fairly active readership.
We have outreach to the LA Conservancy for any referrals that they might have and then help in advertising it through their avenues. We plan to issue it to the Glendale Historical Society, Santa Valley Historical Society, Friends of Rockhaven as well, hoping that they can then distribute it out into the development community. We're going to try all methods that we can think of to make sure as many people get it as possible.
Any other questions?
I have a couple of questions. What is the lot size on this property, the vacant portion?
The vacant portion is...
What's the zoning on it, current zoning on it?
So it's got split zoning. There's commercial zoning on the south part of the site and residential on the north part of the site.
Is it basically half and half, or there's like...
It's a little more residential to commercial. If you look, there's the jog on the left side. The split comes right where that panhandle begins, right down the middle of the lot.
And the residential is in the back, is it R1250? Is it R1650? Do you know what it is?
R3050, then with the bonus of the frontage, drops down to R2250, I believe, or even further.
It's a bonus, yeah, it's R20.
And I think a most dense build-out scenario, the degree that a developer might even want to try and take advantage of SB 1818 density bonus provisions, might be something in the area of 80 units. That might not necessarily be anything that the city or the community would support, though. But
What is the lot size again?
It's 3.5 acres almost.
No, I mean the vacant portion that you can build on.
We haven't.
The buildable site.
Looks like it's about a third of that.
The 1 acre?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, a little
we have
more
at least
maybe.
580 feet along Hermosa Avenue. I would say that's about 1/3, and then we have about 435 feet on Honolulu. So, I would say it's about Say a little over an acre? Is that what you said?
Seems, yeah.
If it's an acre with 2250, you have about 20 units by code, basically. I just want to understand what are we trying to, what are we asking? What is our RFQ asking? I know it's kind of vague that developers will come up with ideas, but the other question I had was usually when we talk about private and public partnership, we end up giving up the land and to attract the developers and bring more developers, and they have to build more units in order to make it to pencil out, and the parking will come in play. And I wanted to know what is our goal overall as far as the parking reduction, and what is it that we're trying to, because I think I would go towards more recreation that would go with the rest of the ambiance over there, basically, if we can do anything to have more, I don't know, more recreational use for those vacant sites, if it pencils out or if it makes any sense. But
Right.
And the other question I had was, who's going to maintain the historic portion of it? Is it Parks and Recs, or is it the developer is going to take responsibility for maintaining the rest of the buildings? Or because these are the questions that it's very important. I think the other issue that I wanted to, humbly ask is, or bring to your attention is, let's reach out to the local developers first. I think they will care a lot more than regional or national developers. We have qualified, licensed, bonded, insured developers in this town that they can easily build such a thing and be more sensitive to the rest of the site. I think that's something that we need to, I know you can't be exclusive, but I think we need to be a little bit more, try to attract these developers who are local to come in and do business in Glendale and keep those jobs in Glendale.
Well, certainly the local developers are included in the distribution list. So to the degree that they are interested, they can respond and be considered with others. There is not a process, though, that allows local developers to be considered first over regional or national developers.
I understand that.
But they will have that ability.
Commissioner Garpetian, and I'm sorry, if I may interject. Jay, I'm just going to look to you for a moment, and could you help clarify exactly what our role is today in looking at the RFP?
Because it's a non-designated site at this point, we would love to hear from the commission if you have concerns about potential development of the site, anything that we could work into the RFP. I know you don't have a draft to read because it's not a public document yet. So just basically any thoughts that you have. Okay. We're soliciting. We're also going to the Parks and Rec Department. We want to bring as much thought from the various boards and commissions related to the site before we go to council.
Okay, great. I just wanted to ensure we're not getting
everything
off.
Commissioner Garpetian was mentioning.
Those are all the concerns,
the kinds of thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Your concerns are our concerns. We don't have, staff is not holding a vision for the site and the build-out number that we're looking to achieve. So we are waiting to see what it is that developers might have in terms of vision. Some might come in at a medium density, some might come in at a high density, some might come in at a low density. I don't anticipate a private developer to come in and strictly say, my business is providing recreational space to the community. There is something that they're going to have to take back and be able to make money on in order to consider being able to make the areas of Rockhaven that we are concerned about available to the public, and in order for it to be rehabilitated. So we're looking to see what is the trade-off with the vacant portions of land if our concern is with the historic buildings and the open space on this side.
And our concerns with historic buildings and the open space is maintaining them and keeping it open to public? Is that what it is?
To the degree that, yes, and to what degree can a developer restore and rehabilitate them, make them available to the public along with the open space and any unique programming that might be provided to the community as well? Does it come at a cost to us other than land? We'd have to consider that. Does it come at the loss of ownership of the entire site and then entering into an agreement that there is this reciprocal use? We don't know. We're waiting to see what it is they're proposing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions?
I assume the proposals will come back to us for review as for instance, the arts affordable housing thing that we looked at came through, that we would be seeing.
Do we have that built in?
The proposal, or
I think that would be when we.
The one that's being considered for acceptance.
Oh yeah, Alan has some thoughts there.
Yeah, if I recall, if we arrive at a staff team and through interview, the interview team arrives at a recommendation for this as a developer that has the right qualifications, is willing to work with the community, and seems to understand the site, we'd probably take that to council and say, that's our recommendation. Let's enter into what would be called an exclusive negotiating agreement of some kind with them. Or we basically say, we're going to work with you and only you for a period of time to see what you can deliver. Would think that during that process, while they're doing their community visioning, that they would certainly be coming to HPC, to the Parks Commission, in addition to probably what we would hope is also having a number of meetings with the community that are outside of the commission, sort of visioning workshops with the community. But I'm not sure that we have it built in that once we've arrived at a kind of recommendation, we'd ask you to weigh in on the recommendation. We'd certainly inform you that it's about to go to council. But correct me if I'm wrong, Peter.
No, that's correct. In terms of a recommendation for an eventual developer, no, that's not built in. We can certainly provide an update. It would be built in an RFP process once we do identify an actual project and proposal with design and all that for consideration. That something like that would be coming back.
One thought would be between the staff panel selection of a bidder that we want to move forward into an ENA, the negotiating agreement, we could bring back the vision, the concept that's being proposed to, obviously, to community and city agencies to make sure that that's simpatico with the direction we all want to go.
Right. Actually, it'd be prior to staff's recommendation to the council to enter into exclusive agreement.
Right.
So we want to go into that meeting saying, this is what staff is recommending. This is what the HPC has said about this particular proposal. This is what the Parks Commission has said about this particular proposal. So we'd want to go just before that.
So we'll build it into the schedule.
Regarding the public-private partnership, is there anything in the RFQ that's going to indicate what the city is willing to do, either from an annual amount, dollar figure per month, or what kind of partnership contribution going forward? Or you're looking for the developer to advise on all of that? And is that clear in the RFQ that you want them to propose city's participation, what that is, their participation on an ongoing basis?
Remember, the RFQ is to identify the best qualified developer to then go out and then ask, now put a proposal together. What we said in the RFQ is that some developers may be ahead of others, and some might feel that it may grant them an edge to be able to not only give their qualifications, but to also give some preliminary financials, maybe some preliminary schematics as well. And so we would look at that in making and evaluating the developers. We have not in the RFQ laid out any groundwork as to what it is that, if anything, we would contribute. We've just come out and said, we bought in 2008 $55 a square foot, and we own the site. Now tell us what it is that you think is your vision for the site, and eventually what it would entail.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. First speaker on this is Mike Lawler.
Hi, I'm Mike Lawler. I'm representing the Historical Society of the Crescenta Valley. I don't have to tell you guys that you've done a great job of preserving Glendale's past. I mean, Alex Theater, Doctor's House, Duke Magin Park, Brand Library. The list goes on and on of the sites that the city has done a great job of protecting and restoring over the years, and I hope that Rockhaven will be the next site that'll happen to. We're very engaged with the city on this process. We're doing all the meetings. We'll be on the site when the developers come to answer any questions and to give them the community's perspective on the site. We hope that you'll support the RFQ process. My little buzz phrases are that this is the last sanitarium in an area that was known for its sanitariums. This is a sanitarium that was created by women, for women, And we hope that Glendale will preserve the past and facilitate the future. Thanks.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Joanna Linkhorst.
Hi, Joanna Linkhorst, representing the Friends of Rock Haven, a community that has reached out to even beyond the community that's around Rock Haven. We've heard from people from New York and from Long Beach and all around to try and represent to the city. And we also represent the city in being allowed to give tours so we can let the city know the community that enjoys it and is involved with it. And I learn more and more all the time about it. Mike stole my lines about it being historically significant to Crescenta Valley, but I can also say that each of the buildings is historically significant in that they were changed very little from the time that they were built until now. The tile in the bathrooms are still all original, it seems to me. There are a couple of buildings. Obviously, there's one that is condemned. The one that replaced the Rock House in 1972, no one's got any sentimental attachment to that one. And there are a couple other little buildings that are small storage buildings, laundry, that sort of a thing. No architectural or historical significance and probably not real good for any kind of reuse. But the core buildings, the houses that were already there in the 20s, the buildings that Agnes Richards herself had built by a Glendale firm, are magnificent, and we appreciate the things that the city has been doing to take care of them, to try and keep them stable and preserved as best as possible. We're excited about the RFQ and looking forward to the sorts of things. Everybody's got ideas. You ask anybody, and everybody's got a different idea. We had our hopes and our plans about park and art space and museum for the Crescenta Valley, and we'll just kind of see what sorts of things these people can bring forward to bring this place back to life and revive the gardens. And I know the perfect spot to put the California landmark plaque as soon as we get that, and then we'll have a sign on the freeway directing people right on down. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanna, for your enthusiasm and for all your work with Friends of Rock Haven. You've really kept it going.
Some of you have been on the tour. Stuff, if anybody's.
Great, thank you.
Not okay.
Yeah, no, you can.
Oh, okay. This is kind of
Question?
but can I ask a question?
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah.
Come back up.
Come back. This is a little out of left field, but you mentioned that the sanitarium has a strong legacy of dealing with issues that affect women, and it was built for women's health issues. Have you reached out at all to the Commission on the Status of Women and informed them of the significance and history of the building? Because they're very proactive and they're very well connected. Not that we aren't, but but they are. And they might find it interesting, and who knows where that might.
They did come on a tour, and I was able to give a presentation about Agnes Richards at the last meeting, and they're absolutely lovely, and they enjoyed the place, and that's about as far
as
it's
far
gone.
as
I
it
haven't heard
went.
anything.
Okay.
I reached out to the Sir Optimists of both Verdugo City and Glendale, and I have yet to hear from them, but I would love to tour them and show them the place.
Okay. Might have some suggestions for you that we could take,
Love it.
but I don't have them with me. So
Oh, okay.
On that angle.
Okay, please let me know. I'd appreciate
Okay.
it.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Hey, thank you.
Okay. Next speaker is Catherine Yurka.
Hello again. I'm here to say that the Glendale Historical Society strongly supports the issuance of a request for qualifications to solicit interest in restoring and rehabilitating Rock Haven, which would include some limited development that complements the historic character of the site. It is our hope that the process will lead to the selection of a qualified developer, preferably one with experience in historic properties. Our president, Greg Grammer, has been meeting with city staff and representatives of the Historical Society of the Crescenta Valley and Friends of Rock Haven to advocate for this approach in order to give Rock Haven a new lease on life and to make sure that it's preserved for future generations. We look forward to working with the city to ensure that any development plans embrace towards adaptive reuse of the property and retain and revitalize Rockhaven's historic structures, features, and landscaping in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation. We've also requested that Rockhaven, which is one of the most important historic properties in North Glendale, be placed on the Glendale Register of Historic Resources at the conclusion of any rehabilitation and development project. Thanks.
Okay, so I think we're done with that item.
Yeah, unless you have any closing comments anyone wanted to make. I think everyone who needs to hear heard some of the thoughts from the commission, so there's no vote or anything.
Right. Okay, thank you everyone for coming, for the presentation, and for all of your thoughts. Okay, next is 7B, 2430 Bywood Drive, Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application.
Just before we begin this, I just want to introduce formally before the commission and the public, although everyone I believe has met Chris Agardi, who is our newest staff member in the Urban Design Studio. She's an urban designer. She has a background in architecture and urban design and an interest in preservation, and we're going to be working together on preservation issues as they come up. And so we thought, well, why not throw her into this by giving her a Glendale Register nomination to work on? So that, Chris Agardi.
To Glendale, Chris.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I've been here since November, and this project was interesting to me because I'm very familiar with Eichlers coming from the Bay Area, and so this gave me an opportunity to see the counterpart in Southern California to the Eichler. So we are here to talk about 2430 Bywood Drive, Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application. Let me go back there. This modest one-story single-family residence is a good example of modern-style post and beam construction. It is located in the Glen Oaks Canyon. It was during the post-war housing boom when Diron and Elena Hovagumian were a young couple looking to build a family home that was affordable. They purchased a narrow lot on Bywood Drive. The existing neighborhood was 1920s and 1930s traditional style homes. They were looking to do something a little different, and they knew that the lot that they purchased was very narrow and would take a special hand. They interviewed several architects, and after meeting Conrad Buff and Donald Hensman, who took them on a tour of two of their projects, they quickly hired these two young architects to design their home. They promised them something, and they were thrilled about this, something that would be very different and new to this community. Buff and Hensman were becoming very well known at that time for their post and beam modern style architecture, and 2430 would be a new introduction to this neighborhood of a modern style post and beam home. It's helpful to understand a little bit about Buff and Hensman going into this home. They were classmates at USC and very early collaborators. Before they had even graduated, they had already designed several homes, multiple style designs that culminated in approximately 6,000 built homes with their design work. So they graduate in 1952, and they immediately open up their firm with this background of work behind them. While the work that they had done for other developers was not post and beam construction, they started and were essentially starting a whole new direction in their history. they were able to show the two previous works of post and beam construction. But the, let me take you to a survey. This shows you a brief survey of their work through the 1950s time of this post and beam history of their work. And this will help get you familiar with what some of the typical characteristics of this style are. The designs had a horizontal emphasis, flat or low-pitched roofs, wide roof overhangs, exposed wood beams, tongue and groove wood decking that moves from interior to exterior through clear-story windows. Wall finishes included horizontal or vertical wood siding, stucco, or a combination of wood and stucco. And the detailing was plain and simple. Buff and Hensman were also exploring new layouts. They were looking at an open plan that was more oriented towards the family lifestyle. And while this is a side elevation, what it starts to show on the top image is where the family space is much more light and airy and open to the exterior, and the front facade would be much more of a solid wall and private to the street. Another aspect, on the lower portion you see case study number 20, the Bass House in 1958, which probably propelled their firm even more so, and they had the opportunity to actually do another case study home, case study number 28, I believe it was. They went on to win numerous awards. The firm continues to exist, although both Buff and Hensman are now deceased. When you start to look at 2430, you will start to recall from the characteristics of their 50s style. In this modest, simple house, the horizontal orientation and emphasis of the design, it's a small rectangular box. When it has the carport, and here you can start to see the introduction of and the simple movement from wood siding to a brick fireplace to a stucco finish. And you're also seeing the exposed wood beams. You know, on the front facade, the characteristic exposed wood beams, the large overhang, and here's where you start to understand how they're playing with the interior and the exterior and the idea of and the window proportions, and how the family life is now more oriented towards the rear of the family. On the front facade facing the street, you have a more solid wall. Where the public family spaces, you have vertically oriented windows and maybe a slightly larger expanse. Another typical gesture of this time is that recessed doorway. But then the other aspect is the clear story windows, where on the right-hand side, where you have basically the blank walls and just the clear story space, you're now seeing the more private areas of that residence. And here you see how the planar and quality of that roof feels moving, and the wood beams with the tongue and groove decking, where this warm material is moving through the home from interior to exterior, and the beams moving from interior to exterior, and the way you can read that planar roof on top of, through the clear story windows. The side elevation shows you the transition from the front facade wood siding to the stucco, and the stucco continues to the rear yard. On the rear yard side, you can see where there's much more glass, as this is the family's private space. Again, you have the overhang, the deep overhang, the projecting beams. And at the far back, there is a small addition that was made at some point to this home. There were a number of alterations that were made to the residence over time. There were, I want to go back and tell you about one other thing about Buff and Hensman. I think they showed, maybe it was their youth, who knows. Their firm had only existed for 2 years when they completed this home for the Hovagumians in 1954. One of the things they tried, first of all, the fact that they are now trying post and beam construction, which they hadn't done before they started this firm. This is 2 years into their firm, and they try something else, which is radiant heat. They told Darren and Elena that this is something new, and it's affordable. This was the important thing about this home, is that it was very affordable. And so they willingly went along with this. However, it was something new, and the radiant heat, whatever it was in the water, when it interacted with the plastic of the pipes, slowly water started coming around the water heater, and within a year, the system was no longer functioning and they had to put in another heating system. But I think it shows how interesting this team was together to be trying all these different approaches in their career. I think is very cutting edge. This is a very modest home, but so many of the characteristics of this modern style, post and beam construction style, are in this home. I'll go back to the windows and the alterations on this. There were 12 new windows. Vinyl or vinyl-clad wood replaced the existing windows. The proportion and dark color that allows them to blend into the design appears to be acceptable and something that doesn't detract from the intention of the modern style post and beam construction design. There are 2 clear-story windows that were removed at some point and replaced with vinyl sliding windows. A solid panel was added to hide new interiors, construction walls, panels, and the sliding windows are not in keeping with the style of the house and detract from its historic character. Some of the clear-story bays had hopper-style windows or transoms and have been replaced with fixed glazing, but this aspect does not seem to have any significant impact on the exterior appearance. The cement board siding was also added to the front facade at some point in time. Its texture and jointing give it the appearance of horizontal wood siding. Research conducted, looking at the survey of the homes, you could see vertical and horizontal siding. It's possible that vertical siding was not yet being used at the point 1954 when the house was built, but we do not know for sure. The current siding is visually appropriate to the house, but does reduce the level of its material integrity. The staff recommendation for this property is approval for the Glendale Register of Historic Resources under Criterion 3 because of the quality of its architecture. It is a good example of modern mid-20th century design in Glendale, especially as an example of post and beam construction that became associated with the USC style, of which Buff and Hensman were key proponents. If the commission chooses to approve the nomination, staff would recommend Mills Act conditions for the 2430 Byron Drive. They would be to replace the small sliding windows at the clear story openings with hopper windows that maximize the amount of glazing and better reflect the original design. Due to the previous interior work, staff believes it would be appropriate to allow solid panels in these bays to remain. Repair and or replace damaged wood beams, roof deck, and fascia boards as needed. Install metal caps over the exposed portions of the beams to provide long-term protection. And to repair or replace the damaged gutters and downspouts. And the last one is conditional condition. The non-original siding to remain unless documentation of the original material and details can be verified. Staff thinks that, that would be, we can't have no way of knowing at this point in time exactly what was there. The owner is attempting to clarify it with the original owners of the home. Neighbors seem to remember that it was horizontal siding. However, without understanding or knowing the exact size or application, whether it was tongue and groove or lapped, staff would recommend that what is there remain. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Christine. I have one speaker on this item. That's the owner, Jeffrey Head.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Jeffrey Head. I'm the owner of 2430 Bywood Drive. I've owned the house for about a year now. And aside from pride of ownership, having the house listed on the Glendale Register for Historic Resources would make the house an asset to the community. And, professionally, I'm a writer. I write about architecture and design. And I typically do a lot of research when I'm doing my stories. And I have a modernist approach to what I write about. And I took the same objective approach with this house. And even if I didn't own 2430 Bywood, I would still advocate for its recognition and preservation. And I know what I wanted to mention. You may have read an article on the Ross Wine District in the LA Times a couple years ago. That was something that I did, and I feel a connection to Glendale. And I attended Toll and Hoover and went to Keppel for a little while. So I would like my connection to Glendale to include the house. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I should ask any questions for Mr.
Well, I have a
Head while
question.
he's here.
Did you, with this thing with the wood versus the, were you able to get any information from the firm of Buff and Hensman?
I talked with Dennis Smith. He's the last partner in the firm, and he came out and he looked at the house and he said, "Oh yes," he was pointing out the characteristics that were typical of the firm, and he was not definitive either. And the owners, the original owners, are in their late 80s and 90 actually for the owner, and we're trying to figure it out. They have photographs somewhere. I don't know how long it's going to be before they uncover them, if they uncover them, if they exist. But I do know that during this era that the horizontal planks did come in this size. But whether or not they were tongue and groove or some other arrangement, I don't know. But this size corresponds to what would have been available then in wood and not in this current material.
It's like wood.
It does.
It really does look like wood.
Yeah.
It wears better than wood.
Not the right argument here.
That's what I was going to say. Stop while you're ahead.
Okay. No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I have one quick question. The siding itself, though, seems like it should be horizontal rather than vertical. I mean, we mentioned that when we were there. It just seems like if it was vertical rather than horizontal, it would kind of be like stripes and plaids more than anything else. I mean, the way the house just completely goes, it seems that the siding would be going that way.
When I showed the survey, I did that for that reason of trying to understand whether it was horizontal or vertical. And so what I was able to find, if you look at the dates, and what I read prior, I mean, because this is why these 2 pages. What you okay? Let's start on this one. On 1954, the same year as this house, you have vertical siding on this
horizontal?
top. I think it's vertical. I can't see now.
Horizontal.
You mean horizontal?
Maybe it's it must be horizontal, but
Yeah.
I can't see it. 1956 is definitely horizontal. Wait, where was that?
Can't see it going any other way.
I'm sorry,
Can't see it any
yeah.
other way.
Now when you're in 1957 and 1958, you're seeing the vertical siding.
Yeah, that's one of our dilemmas. We don't know. It seems the horizontal emphasis of this house and the fact that it's not a group of pavilions where you might call out one pavilion with
Right.
vertical, and it feels like it wants to be horizontal. It also feels like it might want to be broken up at each of the column lines rather than the boards now span 2 column lines. But that's why we made a conditional condition, because there's too much uncertainty.
And the owners just can't remember if it was up and down or...
Yeah, I'm working on it. But one of the things that I'm looking at too in the course of trying to figure this out is that the vertical siding on the Buff and Hensman houses are typically on structures that have a little more dimension to them. They have more right angles. They're not just a simple rectangle like Bywood is. So I think maybe that might have been a consideration, an aesthetic consideration for them. But if 5 years from now, there's a photograph that shows up and it's vertical, I'll change it. Because I want the house to be original. I want it to be what it is. And I don't have a problem making any of the recommended changes and the conditional condition as well.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Okay. Who would like to start?
I'll start. Well, thank you so much for bringing this before us today. I really enjoyed visiting your home, and it's definitely an interesting opportunity for us to add this to the register because we don't have too many modern homes, and especially the post and beam style. What I love about this style is it is very, very simple and elegant. I love the way you can see in the photo, if you mind going to the house actually, where you can see the beams running through from exterior all the way through interior when you're in the space, and then out exterior on the other side through that beautiful glazing. So I think it's a really good example for us to add to the Glendale collection. I also was very fascinated by, even in that era, how they incorporated the gutters into the edge of the roof line, so they're concealed. I mean, gutters are never really attractive. So that the way they beautifully put these into the roof line, that you don't even notice them, I think is a very elegant design for this home, and a feature that should be celebrated. I also agree with staff's recommendations on changing the windows. I think that would enhance the front facade of the home and bring it back to a little more original character. But I support the nomination Mills Act.
I agree with my colleague, and houses like this make me glad I live in a place like Southern California, because Southern California's legacy is to really appreciate the creativity and innovative spirit of this type of architecture, and the simplicity is so exquisite. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Proc House. I know it's a very different design, but it's small, it's elegant, it's simple, and it stands out. It's unique, and the thing about being exemplary is something that we try to shoot for with landmarking. It's not always easy with some of the, where we have a huge stock of a certain type of style, but with this type of thing we can really, go a little bit nuts on the thing, because we just don't have that many. So it's beautiful, the ingenuity of, the gutters and just the elements of the house are just so noteworthy, and of course the beams are so striking that it just, your eye just immediately goes to everything on the house. And I agree with all of the things here, and I think, Jeffrey, the spirit of, your stewardship of the house is well taken, and I don't know if it's in the Mills Act conditions, but certainly, I think we, hopefully you'll feel safe that we would put in that if something comes to light on the characteristic of the, horizontal versus vertical, or any other design elements that come to light down the road, that you would act on those, because it sounds like you're going to anyway. So we might as well put them right into the Mills Act. And thank you very much for being such a careful and considerate steward of such a unique home.
Well, I would like to thank Mr. Head for allowing me to come see his house. I've found it fascinating. It's an architectural style that I can really understand. There's, as they said, it's very modest and minimalist, and he took me all through the house, inside and out, and I believe that houses sometimes find the right owner, and I think in this one with Mr. Head, it just found the right owner, and I believe that everything that they've said that he will do immensely. I think this will add to our Glendale Register. It's not like anything you've seen, and you should go take a look at it. So I concur with my other commissioners.
Turn?
Yeah.
It's beautiful, but the way that
which
on the very end piece, I think it's hiding the gutter.
And there isn't a trim piece at the very. You're talking about on the side? And there's no final trim piece. That's like you cut a section.
The original design or not, but I've never seen it that way. So that's something that maybe you can look into. But overall, I really appreciate you bringing this house forward. And when you say the right owner, you're very right, because he knew every detail about the house. I'm very picky. I see things, but he mentioned one thing that I didn't see, and it was the grout line on the brick of the fireplace. That the vertical ones are full, the horizontal ones are not, and it's a detail from that era. And I didn't pick it up, but he knew about it and he let me know, and I appreciate that. I support the project as well, and wish you good luck.
Thank you. So being last, there really isn't that much more to add. I concur. I do think it's an exemplary home. Commissioner Shire, as you really appreciated the beams going through that clerestory level and coming out the other side, I really appreciated the underside of the roof deck, just sort of doing the same thing. It was just, it's just amazing. And though we don't look at the inside of, well, we don't for Mills Act, but it was just stepping in. Thank you for letting us come in and just stepping in and looking to, your left and seeing the living room, and then just looking down that beautiful long hall, which is sort of the axis of the house, and seeing the master at the other end. And it's just such a wonderful space. And I do think you are the perfect steward, and thank you for bringing this forward, and I will support the nomination.
And no pressure on the owner, though, right?
Yeah. Other than
sorry, Commissioner Vega.
It's probably in here, the west-facing door that looks over the part that hasn't been I assume you're grass-creating that area there. Oh, okay. That's really, yeah. That door was obviously in need of repair too, and I assume it's in here somewhere, but I don't see doors, so I thought I'd mention that.
We could add that to the general wood conditions.
So do we have a motion?
I'm sorry, before we have a motion, Jay, we typically have a time frame on our Mills Act.
Yeah, we always do,
report.
which raises a question for the commission. A conditional condition is, we've never done it before. We legally would have trouble requiring an owner, if he found photographs in 10 years, unless we wrote a condition for 10 years to force the issue. I think Jeffrey would do it regardless. But you should consider that in terms of, we generally think about the cost, the potential cost of the repairs. We started a 1-year time frame, often have extended to 2 and even 3 years, but not usually much more than that. So if the commission wants to recommend a time frame, that would be great.
For the siding separate from the other elements?
Right.
Is that how
Well,
we're
no, I
handling it?
think we'd have to keep it all. Well, we could have a separate time frame for the
I'd
siding.
recommend that for windows and wood, that maybe he's given 2 years, but that the siding might go out to 5 years. That seems to be a large project if we do find something.
The original owners aren't getting any younger, so we have to hurry on this. So,
Well, we can shorten it, but
what I think
happens
5 years is fair because there may
reasonable?
be documentation that comes out. You never know. A Japanese architectural magazine has a photo that no one's seen, or be anything. So we would have a condition for the window repair, the wood door, and the just overall wood repair, or window replacement, wood repair, the door for 2 years.
yes.
Sounds fair.
And then 5 years for the siding, if we find anything.
What is the drippy-looking material on the outside of the gutters?
Those are the welds, probably.
Oh,
Is that right?
I was very curious about that. Yeah.
Jeffrey, just come up to the microphone.
Oh, sorry, Jeffrey.
Yeah, that's part of the seal on the roof.
Oh.
So the 2 owners ago, spray foam, right, over the roof. So that's the drip over from the spray. And then when it comes time to redo the roof, and I did put this in the application, is that it's going to be a major job to remove the foam, and then to get to the roof, and then all the water pipes on the roof too. So that's going to require additional work and craftsmen to address.
Thank you. Never seen a material like that before.
Yeah, usually it's white. I mean, these days it's white. And I think maybe, I'm not even sure why they added, I think they actually added a color to the spray, maybe match the house or something.
That's the only downside of those roofs. The insulation value is very low, so
Yeah, totally.
you can hardly walk on them. So be careful.
I don't think so. 'Cause we
Well, I'll
Are we
make,
ready
I'll make
for
a
a
motion.
Sure.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the address of 2430 Bywood Drive to City Council, to add this to the Glendale Register of Historic Resources, and also accommodate the Mills Act contract with the conditions that were stated, giving 2 years for wood repair and window replacement, and up to 5 years for anything discovered on the wood siding.
Second.
Okay, may we have roll call, please?
Jay?
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor,
Yes.
Commissioner Shire,
Yes.
Commissioner Garpetian,
Yes.
Chair Vartanian.
Yes.
We have a unanimous vote, 5-0.
Congratulations.
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 Thank you.
Thanks for your report.
Okay. With that, we'll move to item 8, Planning Division updates and informational briefings. At 8A, we have update on Brockmont Park Historic District and proposed Neodrara Drive Historic District.
We have more good news on our historic district fronts. Brockmont Park, I'm sure you all know, was voted unanimously by City Council to be Glendale's 6th historic district. It's not quite in effect right now because it's a zone change, so it takes 30 days. So May 7th will be the date that it's official. Brockmont Park's a beneficiary of recent efforts to create signs for some of our more recently, but not too recently, designated districts. So we're already in process to have the signs created for Brockmont Park.
Right.
And those should, I can't say when they're going to go up because I don't know, but hopefully in the next few months we'll have those up. In terms of Neodrara Drive, we have had very little time, frankly, at staff level to move this through as quickly as we'd like to. I think this is a new reality of processing a lot of applications. So we're asking for patience on the part of everyone involved, and everyone's been great. We do have we're at the point where we're ready to issue the request for proposals to consultants who are going to do the historic study. We have a draft of that's being reviewed. So without putting a date on it, because I've done that too many times and missed the deadlines, but I think in the very near future, we should have that out for bid. And then when we get the proposals back, we'll conduct interviews of the top 3 bidders, and we will select a bidder who we think is best for that, and then we will have to go to City Council to authorize funding for that. Once the funding's authorized, the bidder will be able to begin the process of the study, which could take, as you know, a number of months, 6 months, 8 months, possibly less. It's a relatively small district, at which point we'll be bringing it back into the process of public meetings, Historic Preservation Commission review, et cetera. So that is everything. At this point, that's the only other historic district application that we have, though there's always buzz that there are a few more out in the wings that we at this point are fine with them in the wings.
So while we have sort of this extended, time period just due to staffing and other constraints, have you seen any requests for work coming across, or is that something you're able to keep track of in the district?
Yeah, well, we keep track of the district. Any work that comes in for a property within the district, we're going to review closely. We can't officially apply the district guidelines to it, but luckily in Glendale, the general design review guidelines that we have do take into account the existing character of properties. We have one property right now that I shouldn't talk about too much because it's not agendized, but we're working with some owners to achieve resolution on some work that had been begun without permits. And at this point, we're still in the early phases of negotiation. So,
great. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay, at 8B is update on appeal of HPC design review decision regarding 1720 Grandview, North Cumberland Heights Historic District.
And this is very recent past for the commission, but I still put some photos in to jog memories if needed. This is the legalization application that the commission considered last month at 1720 Grandview. That was brought up in the public comments discussion. So if you have specific questions that you'd like to address based on that, this would be a good time to do that. But the update is basically to tell you that the applicants have agreed to put shutters back on 2 of the window openings that face the street, which was one of the commission's conditions for this case. And they have not agreed to remove the iron fence that was put at the front entry. And they have appealed the commission's decision within the legal appeal period. So we'll be bringing that to City Council. It's a 2 to 3 month process typically to bring appeals up to council. And so we'll be working on a staff report, and we'll certainly let the commission know when that's going to be heard. And then if you have any questions, I could address any of the issues that were brought up by the speaker from Historical Society. Or not.
We could probably, in my own mind, get into another 2-hour discussion about this if we start talking about it. So I know I've given it a lot of thought since the meeting. I've never thought about a project that we've reviewed as much as I thought about this project after the fact. And I can only say on the issue you mentioned, the gate, that I think we gave them an option of a lowering of the gate,
height, right?
Or the gate there, and I realize that this is not relevant to the historic issue. It's more of a neighborhood design guideline, neighborhood feel issue. But to me, the feeling of barricading oneself behind basically a hunting blind, which is what that hedge is a very dangerous situation, and certainly the gate doesn't enhance anybody's safety. In fact, it probably makes it harder to get to the door if you need to make a run for it than not having the gate there. So I feel very strongly it should be removed. But, now there are other things that are on the table for discussion, so I'll stop talking.
And just for a big picture, staff, we spent a lot of time thinking about these issues also, and came up with what we thought was the best decision and the best interpretation of the guidelines. The guidelines for historic districts, and several of you were in the trenches during the formulation of design guidelines and the historic district ordinance, and there is a certain amount of latitude. We're not treating houses in historic districts like museum pieces, and we know there are going to be changes that are made to them over time, and that's what we guarantee every time we step in front of people and tell them this is the process and this is what a historic district is. There may be disagreement over specific aspects of the decisions, but we're always very thoughtful, always thinking about the Secretary of the Interior standards, and always thinking about the guidelines. We do not mandate that windows be deteriorated to a point of not functioning before we replace them. That's kind of standard preservation language, and it's in the beginning part of the guidelines. A later part of the guidelines does address the fact that we could have vinyl windows installed on side facades, for example, even though they're visible from the street. Personally, I don't see that we're going to have much opportunity to do that. It's going to be hard to meet the letter of the guidelines in that case. But especially with windows, I think there would be a lot of concern from the community if people who wanted to install more energy efficient windows in their homes were told that they can't do that in a historic district because for whatever reason your windows haven't deteriorated to a point where they need to be replaced. Windows are the #1 problem we have, whether it's in a district or especially outside of a district. And we work really hard to make sure that in districts we're looking at the replacement windows at a higher level than we look at outside of the city. And then on a Glendale Register Mills Act property, we're going to look at them at an even higher level than we would for the districts. So this is, it's an ongoing issue, but I think the guidelines were specifically written with enough latitude to allow us to kind of realistically address situations as they come up.
Well, I'd like to just address the Glendale Historic Society's, presentation today or letter, because I think, one, it's very, very valuable information. I appreciate the time and effort put into it, and obviously we love your input, and the more we can get that input prior to decisions helps us.
That's what I was referring to. Yes.
But, I understand things fall through the cracks and people are busy and schedules and all that, but I think your input is very valuable, and so we'd like to see that in the future continued. I do have a question, kind of processed, though, for you, Jay. let's just say it goes to city council, right, and they give them the appeal, or they reverse the decision. What's the process? I think I asked last time, what's the process then for changing a home from a contributor to a non-contributor? Because, you know, one more thing in the wrong direction in my mind, it's already like on the edge of being a non-contributor. You know, I wasn't pleased with the direction last meeting, and now if it goes further in the wrong direction, I mean, what do we do from there?
Yeah, I disagree that it would lose its contributing status. Okay. In some ways, when you look at these houses, you have to look at them with the eye of, if someone was surveying the house after these changes were made, would it be a contributor or not? Okay. I still think it would be a contributor. The gate is the biggest issue, of course, because that's so atypical for the style, and we had a lot of stylistic confusion on this house. You know, what was it originally? Is it a minimal traditional? Is it a Spanish? We were looking at different things and, you know, made decisions based on that. If the commission felt that it would lose its contributing status, we don't have an official process, but we can certainly do a survey update that would call it a non-contributor. Under CEQA, that wouldn't be an issue. You have to lose the eligibility of the district, and a single house, there's case law that the loss of a single house in a district isn't going to remove its eligibility, which raises the question of, well, how many of these things can we have? It could be the death of 1,000 cuts, and that's not addressed so well. So we have to be cognizant that when we're losing contributors, that there is a magic number at some point where the district isn't a district anymore. But in a district as large as North Cumberland Heights, it's not an issue for one house to lose its contributing status.
And then what presentation will you be making at City Council, or I assume you'd be making a presentation on this? And if it's now the decision is being appealed for just the gates and that ironwork that's completely enclosing that, will you prepare some photographs of other homes and how it should look? Because the examples the owner provided were not good examples. They were not porches or those open terraces. They were a single setback door, like front door with ironwork in that, you know, in the way that they were trying to justify their own. Mm-hmm. And so I think it would be helpful for the council to see some better examples of what it should be and what it absolutely should not be. No,
and that's good advice, and I think we would kind of get photos together. The whole issue is this is a porch on the house, regardless of what style the house was originally. And porches are open almost by definition. Yeah. And so we would definitely make a strong case that we think that's the historically appropriate way to go. I also don't think there are any comparable examples that are historic anywhere in Glendale, probably.
Well, my question is a little bit the other way around. Now this is being appealed to council. Council can overturn the entire decision that we made and go back and say the windows are not. Is that how it is?
The appeal is specific to the ironwork.
So it doesn't allow the council to review the entire case.
They shouldn't. It doesn't allow them to. I don't think it allows them to legally. We'll present the entirety of what was brought to the commission, and then we'll talk about the applicants agreeing to the commission legalizing the windows, the applicant agreeing to put shutters on at the commission's request. But the focus of the discussion is going to be on the ironwork.
Oh, so had he appealed the entire decision, then City Council could have reversed the whole thing and gone even stricter?
It's a possibility, yeah.
But now, because it's just one of the two?
Yeah, he
was that strategic?
On the applicant's part? I cannot say.
Good question.
But we really, I don't think that we want City Council second guessing the commission on these issues. You're the city's experts on what's appropriate and what isn't, and I think it's important to stress that to City Council and say the commission felt these things were appropriate to the house, and the commission didn't feel that way about the iron. So.
Okay.
If I may,
I don't think there was nefarious strategy or anything there.
If I may venture, I mean, when we get closer to the hearing date, I'm sure Jay will be in touch with the commission. Given the nature of the discussion that the commission had, I would expect that the council would appreciate if commissioners came to the appeal hearing to share your thoughts and concerns and the nature of the conversation. So I'm sure Jay will let you know when that date occurs. Yeah.
Do you review some of the entire discussion we had and motions that weren't passed, or anything to kind of walk council through the difficulty of the decision, what the some of the initial concerns were, wanting to be reasonable yet hold to the guidelines? And
to be honest, this is my first appeal, but I've worked with other staff on DRB appeals. Generally, we haven't focused on the back and forth discussion at the commission. The focus is really on what the commission's decision was. It could certainly come up either in testimony or, through brief mention.
Well, I just think it might be helpful, because if you take just the appeal of one thing and the council members think, oh, that's ridiculous, we're being so petty, it's just ironwork. Had they seen all the other things we had to try to be reasonable about, the windows, stucco or brick or whatever, saying that, this really does change the look of the porch. And so we were very gracious, I think, in trying to be reasonable. And so I just thought it might be helpful.
Yeah, well, the staff report will definitely there's a whole background section, background history, where we'll go through that. In DRB staff reports for appeals, it doesn't include, nitty-gritty discussion back and forth, like I said, but it'll definitely be, the information will be there, and possibly through testimony could be clarified.
Well,
Commissioner Shire, that that's where a commissioner attending the hearing, the appeal hearing, will be helpful.
Yeah, and just one last thing. Then, also, there was quite a lot of discussion from the owners about coyotes and the wildlife and the danger in Glendale. I didn't even want to entertain that, but my thoughts are that's going to happen again, right, in front of City Council. And is there anything to say that we are not the Wildlife Commission? We are historic preservation, and we look at architecture. And if really there's such a large issue with coyotes and the danger and being attacked, the city would know about it. They would have done something, So, is any of that tempered?
We chose not to really focus on that in the staff report for some of the reasons you can expect. The applicant, I'm certain, will be bringing that up for discussion. There are other members of the community who received a thick packet of some email back and forth discussions about the issue. It seemed there weren't a lot of people on that, but there was passionate discussion about the issue. I think there are the plantings at the front of the house do raise questions about, if that's a concern, then why was this brought up, or why were these planted? Again, that's not something that I would be bringing up, because that's not part of the discussion that we had, but anyone could bring that up through testimony. So.
And city council members might bring it up too. I mean, we have a fence ordinance that doesn't relate to this house, but the rationale for that ordinance brings up similar issues.
We had coyotes living next to a city council member and didn't put a fence up there. So it's, everyone will have an opinion. And I think the council decision, though, will be as informed by historic appropriateness as possible. That's our goal, is to make those issues as clear as we can. But there's so many other dimensions to those decisions that it's kind of hard to predict.
Thank you.
The one good thing is it wouldn't set precedent for everyone to come back and say, well, I'm now going to enclose the front of my house with ironwork because of this decision. So,
I think when council reviews the staff report and see the amount of unpermitted work that was done and it was approved by this commission, and the only thing we asked was just lower that enclosed gate or the railing. I don't think, I know there are a couple of the council members that are really adamant about unpermitted work that's been going on in the city, and rightfully so. And I'm surprised they appealed it, because I thought it would open up this entire case back again for the council to review it, and that would be shooting yourself on the foot, because then they could reverse the entire thing.
They could lose everything.
Yeah, they could lose everything. And I think and I told them the other day, I told the gentleman over here that he got off really easy. I mean, I haven't seen all this kind of work, all this work being done and just easily going through the commission. And the only thing that we asked was just lower that gate a little bit, or the railing a little bit. But we'll see how it turns out. So.
That's right.
Well, and I'm just going to say, we know that the vote was 4-1, and I was the only person who was not necessarily opposed to those gates at the front of the house. And I'm just going to say that I think when we're talking about I think this is a highly emotionally charged issue for these owners, and I think for that part of the community up there. So maybe as a commission going forward, we should think about, and I don't know that we have to put it into degrees of emotional attachment to an issue, but maybe we should think about our tolerance for being a little harsher on unpermitted work, and not leaving it to the simpler things. I mean, I still would argue that putting in, although I agree that a gate that high does not fit necessarily what we would consider a standard for a historic house of this type, I also don't personally want to pass judgment on what makes people feel safe or secure. But we could have made them change their windows, and we could have,
ask them to put the veneer back.
right.
And
So I think we did deliberate this very thoroughly. I don't think any of us took that decision lightly, and I think, and perhaps it's a step in our process of how we may choose to approach things going forward, if that's fair to say.
Sure, definitely.
The only thing I'm going to ask Jay, and I don't know, I'm just going to mention this. I don't know if it's the right time or if we need to start a discussion, but I'm just concerned now, or I want to ask, do we have a conflict in terms of what we're saying about window replacements in the introduction to the guidelines as opposed to when you get into the actual?
It does seem like there's a conflict. We've worked with the guidelines successfully since they were written, but we've taken the more liberal approach, which going back in my preservation career, even in historic districts in New York City and other places, windows are the problem, and alternatives to single-pane wood windows are regularly entertained. But there are plenty of historic districts, including in the Los Angeles area, including in parts of Pasadena, that don't do that. So it's really a kind of philosophical orientation that's kind of established at the beginning when you develop your program. And I happen to know, even though I wasn't here, but some of you undoubtedly remember that in order to build popular support for historic districting, a lot of compromises were made. In some cities, the non-visible rear facades are regulated in historic districts. In Glendale, they're not. In some cities, interiors can be regulated. In Glendale, they're not. So that's kind of the underlying basis for it. If we ever had to revise or re-edit the document, we could look at that.
I mean, I'm just going to quickly read from the introduction under windows. It says, repair of historic windows is always preferable to replacement. I mean, that's kind of loose or hesitant, if I might use that word. And then we say replacement should be limited to severely deteriorated window components. And I'm going to guess, I wasn't part of that committee, that the should as opposed to a must was part of that.
Yeah, the should-shall discussion was
right.
a big one at the time, and should was the way.
So it's a tough one, but I also want to thank the Historical Society for all your time on all of these projects, and I know, or I understand that you'll have somebody who may have a professional, expertise to look at the staff reports going forward. So thank you for your time and your input.
Vote early and often.
That's right, totally.
With that,
Update?
I guess we're adjourned.
No, we have one more.
Oh, I'm
Update
so
number
sorry.
C, one more
Put
time.
on my glasses.
And this is just reiterating what Sean Bursell mentioned. But one thing that was neglected to be mentioned was that May is Historic Preservation Month. It's a national event sponsored by the National Trust for Historic Preservation in conjunction with state historic offices and then down to the local municipalities. And the National Trust comes up every year with a new theme, so I thought I should say it out loud. It's a new age of preservation: embark, inspire, engage. So that's the theme for this year's National Historic Preservation Month. And based on, for the last few years, the Commission has talked about what can we do to be more involved, and gradually we're getting more and more involved. This year I just wanted to remind everyone that on April 29th, all commissioners are hopefully able to attend the City Council proclamation of Historic Preservation Month. And members of the community should be there also to show that this is a community that really cares about its past and really cares about preservation. And we've had a good turnout in years past, so that will be April 29th in the City Council chamber at 6 o'clock. Very soon after 6, they should get there on time. And then we have the 3 events that Sean also mentioned. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The first one we have is also something that we do at staff level here, but every year we take over the display cabinets at the Central Library, which are kind of right on the axis when you're walking in. And we put up a nice little display of all of the wonderful gems of preservation and history that we have on the Glendale Register, our historic districts. We have it updated so that it's up to date with Glendale Register 104 and Brockmont Park. And that goes up on May 1st and is there through the rest of the month. And then to remind anyone listening that we are really hoping that people come out for the free tour, free walking tour of the Civic Center. It's Saturday, May 10th. It starts at 10 o'clock. You don't have to get here at 10. If you come at 11, we're going to send you on your way. It's a self-guided tour. We start here at the Municipal Services Building in the courtyard where the fountain is. And it's going to be a cool tour because it shows 3 centuries. We have properties that span 3 centuries of time on the tour. Many of them are civic monuments, the courthouse across the street, this building, Glendale Register number 100, City Hall. We have little houses. We have 3 great religious buildings. If anyone has never been inside the First Methodist Church on Broadway, that's going to be open. Even if you think it's not the most beautiful building you've ever seen from the outside, even though I love it, but I hear many people don't like it. But once you get inside there on a sunny day, it is amazing, and you don't get to see it very often. So we're going to basically go down Broadway, circle back up to Wilson, and go between, I can't remember, Jackson and Cedar, I believe. So it's about an hour or so of walking time. And then at noon, we're going to have a reception downstairs in the courtyard and celebrate the designation of this building. Alan?
Are we going to have the square dancing in the courtyard? The image, recreate that image you love so much.
There will be no liquor at this noontime event, so I can't imagine. But if you want to start it up,
Alan been practice.
Yeah, we will have some music playing in the background. So I'll get Turkey in the Straw out and get you a little vest or something. And then finally, Sean had mentioned that on May 21st at the Seeley's building at what time? 7 o'clock?
Yes, 7 p.m.
We're having a workshop to let people know how to get their property on the Glendale Register. And it's not just their house, it's any kind of property in Glendale. We'd love to see more diversity in terms of the types of buildings we have. And that's 7 o'clock at the Seeley's building at the corner of San Fernando and Broadway. And that's this year's Preservation Month.
Okay, great. And I just want to reiterate for the Civic Center walking tour, the Glendale Historical Society and city staff has put in a lot of time and effort putting that tour together and putting the booklet together, and I think it's going to be a really great day. So I encourage everyone to come out. And so with that, I think now we are adjourned at 7:05.
Thank you.
Thank you.